Sawadee Krap and welcome to another episode here for the Funked Pod, Mindful Media and Communication. As you can see from the title, once again, I'm not pulling any strings. I'm showing you what it's about. It's about the impact of media on political discourse, and I'm trying to do a somewhat comprehensive deep dive, as deep as you can dive within like 15 minutes or so, because we're keeping those episodes around 10-15 minutes to not go too much overboard. If you want a real deep dive, join my class. So hey everyone, I'm glad you're back. I'm glad I'm back. I'm glad the show is back. And as I just mentioned in the intro, we're breaking down how media, particularly social media, but also other forms of media, influence political dialogue, right? So we're gonna look into a few media theories, and we're also gonna look into a few real-world examples. And in the end, I'm also going to mention a few concerns, mostly ethical concerns. You can see that's kind of like a theme during all of our past episodes, talk a little bit about ethics, just because I think it's so easily forgotten, right? So sit tight, get ready for, I think, a very information-packed discussion, but I hope still easily understood. So we all know how political debates can get heated, right? I mean, probably even amongst friends. And it's even worse online, of course, where it sometimes feels like it's a never-ending war of words, especially on X. I haven't seen it much on Threads, but it's also maybe because you can't use hashtags on Threads right now, and that's why you don't find each other. Like those filter bubbles are like exclusive right now. So today we try to look at this whole thing a little bit more critically, and we're going to see how media platforms are designed and how that design can either promote like insightful conversations, but also fuel destructive ones. Okay. So let's start. Let's just talk about media as the political arena, so to speak, if you want to paint a picture in your head, okay? So media is kind of like the battleground for all forms of debates. And we've just seen that in the US, actually. I'm going to stick with lots of US examples, simply because I need my visa here in Thailand, so I'm not going to talk about Thai politics. And the US is just, I think, the most well-known when it comes to a global scale. Everyone sees at least something from the US, right? So this whole concept of like having the media as your battleground is backed by a theory that we discussed many times already, right? The agenda setting theory. As you remember, the agenda setting theory suggests that media doesn't just reflect public opinion, but actually shapes it. And so when media focuses on specific particular issues, be it climate change, social justice, foreign policy, and so on, those issues, they rise in public consciousness. On the other hand, if you ignore certain issues, you might try to like push it under the rug, so to speak, right? Astroturfing is like something that comes to mind more on this as we move on. So either you highlight certain issues or you ignore certain issues. So that's the agenda setting theory. Let's take an example, right? And I'm going to go way back because I don't want to be like too current in this regard, but a very big issue back then in 2014, I only noted down like, I want to talk about Flint, but I think it was in 2014. It was like before the election, right? So the Flint water crisis got like huge media coverage, right? That of course amplified the issue on a national level, maybe even on an international level, and it brought more attention, funds, and eventually some level of accountability, right? So that shows how media visibility actually drives action. Okay. However, it's also very, very important to mention that algorithms and data analytics play a super big, like a huge role here, right? Platforms like Facebook and even like services such as Google, they use obviously super complex algorithms to curate what you see in search results, in your feed, and so on, right? So recent controversies like for example, the alleged bias when it comes to your social media platforms, right? That they suppress or promote certain political viewpoints, they underscore the power and responsibility these platforms hold, I believe. So the question is always like, can we entirely trust algorithms to set our political agendas? Can we trust them to show us everything from both sides of the aisle? Or are there even more sides, not just two sides? That's the question, right? So let's jump into like more details, right? When we talk about media and political polarization, like either left or right. Like polarization is like a huge point of concern when we talk about communication and media studies. Now, we often gravitate toward media outlets that confirm our existing beliefs. And that's a phenomenon that's usually referred to as selective exposure. It's very similar to the filter bubble or the echo chamber that you might have heard. Or even Barack Obama talked about the filter bubbles when he left office, actually, after his second term was over. He said like that we're all stuck in our filter bubbles and we should be aware of it. And he's right. In this case, again, I'm not trying to take sides, but that statement was a smart one because we're all prone to this selective exposure thing, right? We insulate ourselves in those echo chambers that only echo our own views back at us, validating and strengthening our own views. So we're not open to other views, right? And if you see other views, you're like, nah, you only want to hear the echo that echo your own viewpoint. And there's social media like Twitter, X, and Facebook design doesn't help in this case, right? The algorithms, they identify your preferences and, of course, feed you similar content to increase the engagement. And so the result is, of course, you get like a skewed view of the world where it like seems like everyone agrees with you. And anyone who doesn't is either uninformed or malicious. You're like, yeah, they're stupid. We saw that with the first election, and I'm saying first as if the second one is a foregone conclusion. We saw it with the first election of Donald Trump. Everyone was like, nah, he's never gonna win. Like everyone on the more left side of things, like, yeah, no, Hillary's got it, and so on. And then everyone acted like surprised, while everyone more on the right side of things was like, yeah, we got this, ooh, let's go. So, echo chambers at work. A case in point, even more, is the role that social media played in Brexit. Like as a European, right, looking at the Brexit campaign. Like studies show that both sides of the aisle were subjected to a form of like algorithmic curation that led to like increased polarization. Like either the stay supporters and the leave supporters, right, staying in the EU or leaving the EU. And this led to like huge polarization, like they're hating each other, right? So social media platforms may argue they're neutral, but the way they're built has like non-neutral consequences. So of course, Facebook doesn't actively say we, Facebook, want Great Britain to leave or to stay. But the algorithm that Facebook utilizes this echo chamber phenomenon, right, to drive more engagement. So of course, Facebook doesn't care about left or right; they just care about engagement. So that's the issue here. And we can see there's of course lots of influence on political movements and also elections, obviously, right? Let's start with like when I was at uni, like the Arab Spring, for example, right? We saw now not too long ago Black Lives Matter. So social media has changed how movements like mobilize and operate. And one of the theories that explains that, and we talked about this in the previous episode already, is the two-step flow theory. And this one suggests that media affects a few opinion leaders first, who then in turn influence others because, well, they're opinion leaders. In the age of reposts and shares and so on, this influence can be pretty immediate and pretty widespread, of course, right? If the influencer has like a huge reach. And it's not just movements. Elections are, of course, also like increasingly fought online, right? You remember the 2020 elections, of course, candidates used social media more than ever before, not only for campaigning, but also, and it was very annoying, for discrediting their opponents, right? And this now ushers in, I think, ethical dilemmas, like where lines between campaigning and misinformation, they blur, right? again, I'm not taking sides, but for example, like, oh, Donald Trump, Russia, and so on, right? Like, you campaign for yourself, but you're also throwing shade, nothing else, at the other person, right? So are we choosing our leaders? Are we doing this, or is the algorithm doing it for us? Is the question that's built up on that, right? And oh god, yeah, now we're gonna cancel. But no, don't forget the trend of cancel culture either. Yeah, politicians and public figures are now more accountable for their actions and words. Good. But they can also be the target, of course, of internet mobs just based on snippets of information taken out of context. Yeah, where do we draw the line between accountability and online witch hunting? And I know as soon as I say that, you're like, oh, you sound like Tucker Carlson or whatever. And I'm not even a big supporter of Tucker Carlson or of whoever, Joe Rogan or whatnot. But I do see that lots of times when they are about to be cancelled, or when people try to cancel them, it's just based on snippets, never based on the whole conversation. Right? That's a problem. It's even a problem, and I don't want to admit it because I don't like the guy. I don't like Andrew Tate. Okay, so if you're like a top G university, like Hustlers University alumni, there's a door. So I don't like the guy. However, all the criticism, the shade, the cancel, the mobs, it's always based on like conversations taking out of context, like snippets. If you would listen to the whole thing and then you would try to debate him, I'd be all for it, on your side, because I don't like the guy. But you cannot try to cancel him for like 5 minutes out of like a... And yes, if he meant it, then yes, you can, of course. But what I'm saying is we're seeing snippets of conversations that fit into our echo chamber, in our filter bubble, right? Either we're seeing positive things about Andrew Tate, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, not that they were the same people, just saying it, or we're seeing something negative about those people. So the line between like accountability, witch hunting is like difficult to draw. And this leads to also the rapid spread of misinformation. And I hate the term by now, fake news, because everyone's talking about fake news all the time, right? So we heard this all the time. But the implications of fake news are quite dire. So according to another theory we talked about before, Cultivation Theory, remember, the more you're exposed to a particular message, the more it shapes your reality. Yeah, unfortunately, this theory is very often exploited to spread misinformation. Like, remember the Pizzagate thing, the Pizzagate conspiracy theory? It was a clear manifestation of how misinformation can escalate and even lead to real-world violence. And again, I'm not taking sides, because you can see I'm picking examples from either side, right? Same with the Russia collusion, right? So you repeat the claims, Pizzagate, Russia collusion, and so on, in the hopes that everyone just believes you. Yeah, another factor here is motivated reasoning. Yeah, so cognitive bias, that lets us readily accept information that confirms our beliefs and scrutinize information and challenges them. Just think about it for a second. This sounds actually okay, right? Motivated reasoning sounds like, yeah, I do motivated reasoning. Yeah, again, it's a cognitive bias that lets us readily accept information that confirms, that's the problem, our beliefs and scrutinize information that challenges them. Okay? So this is how conspiracy theories like QAnon find like very fertile ground on social media. Yeah, platforms are, again, designed to maximize user engagement, just like with the echo chamber, right? And nothing engages people more than sensational and emotive content, right? There you go. And here's the kicker of all of that, right? You see how much it matters to me. Misinformation is not just a fringe problem. It's being utilized as a political tool by state and non-state actors alike, from again, the Russian interference in US elections, to disinformation campaigns about Brexit, the manipulation of public opinion via social media. It's a geopolitical strategy by now. It's like just part of your toolbox by now, which is insane, right? Misinformation is just part of your toolbox. This leads us to the role of like those hyper-partisan media channels, right? They have become like experts at exploiting human psychology. And they serve as news not just to inform, but to entertain and often, let's be honest, to enrage. And so this type of media environment supported by platforms that profit from high engagement levels polarizes society even more. Again, it's all about the engagement. They don't care left, right, whatever. The more engagement, the more outrage, the better. And it doesn't matter which side it is, like Fox News, MSNBCs, or even like platforms like what's it called? The All American News Network, OANN or something, right? They all benefit from a divided audience. And I've been beating the drum forever. But so by continually providing content that appeals to specific groups, to the sensibilities of the specific groups, they guarantee themselves a dedicated and an engaged audience that keeps viewing it. Okay? This is probably good for business, but what does it do to democratic discourse is the question. Now I almost sound like Russell Brennan, I can't believe it. More later on Rumble. No, I'm kidding, it was a joke. But you see what I'm saying, right? And it's obviously not just traditional media, right? It's YouTube channels, podcasts like this one that not like this one, just podcasts. Like this one is a podcast. They push like extreme views are gaining immense popularity. Alex Jones. The rabbit hole of like those algorithmic recommendations can quickly lead you from a moderate standpoint to a far more radical one, often without even realizing it. This now leads me to promoting responsible political discourse. How do we do this? So what can we do as media consumers? And I want to rely on another theory we discussed before, reception theory. This one suggests that media isn't a one-way street, right? We know that. Audiences actively interpret and make sense of the media that they consume, hopefully. So first off, you got to be aware of your own biases and how they influence your interpretation. Next step would be to make an active effort to break out of your ideological silo. Yeah, you gotta engage actively with different viewpoints, not to win an argument, but to understand a different perspective, and that's important. This doesn't mean giving up your values, but it's more like broadening your understanding of issues, broadening your horizon, so to speak. And lastly, and I said it in the last episode already, before sharing any piece of information, just double check if it's authentic. Doesn't mean you should share less, it just means just double check, just to make sure. Because every time you share something, you're part of the ecosystem, of the media ecosystem, right? With the power to either like elevate or degrade public discourse. So just double check for my sake, for our sake. And so the onus for responsible media consumption lies with everybody who's participating, is what I'm saying. So we've covered quite a lot now in the last 10, 15 minutes, and we talked about like how media sets our political agenda to psychological tricks it uses to keep us engaged, and that impact obviously is vast and complex, right? The first step to being more responsible in this very heavily media-saturated environment is, of course, being aware of all these influences. So as I'm wrapping up, right, I just want to remind you, myself too, that while media can, of course, divide us, and yes, I know it's cheesy, it also has the potential to, of course, unite us. And the choice isn't just with the media moguls, it's not just with Rupert Murdoch and so on, and the tech giants, like Facebook, X, and whatnot. It's with us, the users, the consumers, the citizens. So with great power comes great responsibility, you know it. So let's just strive to use that power wisely. And I almost said white. So wise men once said, I apologize. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. Having that said, let me know how you feel about this whole agenda setting thing when it comes to the media. Do you trust political news in the media? Don't you even listen to the media anymore? Let me know. Add FunkitPod on social media, or just shout out wherever you get your podcasts. If you're old school, send a letter or an email, funkitpod@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to this podcast. Ideally, leave a review. That would be very much appreciated, because maybe we will reach more people on either side of the spectrum. If you're all leaving a review, that would be fantastic. As always, take care, stay safe. We will talk soon. Until then, Sawadee Cup.